up to Defense Watch, earlier this month, President Barack Obama hosted world leaders to the first ever National Security Summit. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was also invited to this conference. The purpose of this conference was to ensure that terrorists do not get hold of nuclear device or nuclear material, and that in a period of 4 years, all unsafe nuclear material or loose nukes are secured. Also, around this nuclear security summit were built other ideas, like making sure that the countries that are involved in the nuclear security, as well as the future of the NPT, CTBT and the FMCT, I have a very distinguished panel. Dr. R. Rajaraman, he is a professor emeritus at the JNU and also the chairman of the International Panel on Fissile Material. Mr. Lalitpal Singh, a former Foreign Secretary and Ambassador to the United States, and the youngest of all is Mr. Yogesh Joshi, who is chairman of the chapter on Global Zero. Welcome to all. Let me start with you, Dr. Rajaraman. Now, we've had this Nuclear Security Summit earlier this month on 13th and 14th of April in Washington. There are 40 world leaders attending this conference. So what were the key objectives of this conference and what were the broad outcomes?
Well, there was an ostensible purpose and there was also the unstated purposes, which were probably more important. The stated purpose was to secure, as you said, but to ensure that none of them get it. The nuclear materials, we mean the masala of the nuclear weapons, the plutonium and highly enriched uranium, which makes for the nuclear explosion. And it's the hardest thing for any person wanting to make a bomb to get hold of. Anything else in a bomb is easier to get hold of. So securing this is very important. And Obama had mentioned this in his Prague speech last year, that something should be done, and he would call a meeting.
State actor, and therefore you deter the state.
As far as the traditional deterrence theory is concerned, the bankruptcy of the traditional deterrence theory is already revealed when it comes to the non-state actors. They don't have the same stakes as states do had at the time of the Cold War. So the rational deterrence theory came up at the time of the Cold War. The only cure for nuclear terrorism is what Graham Allison calls the ultimate preventable catastrophe. It's preventable, it's ultimate, it's ultimate and it's a catastrophe, but it is preventable. And that is why all these nuclear security summits, this kind of endeavors taken by the international community are relevant.
Then we come down to deterrence by denial. You make sure that these nuclear materials, nuclear devices, what Lalit is saying, that nightmare scenario doesn't arrive.
Exactly. Those kind of situations have to be dealt with, and that's the only cure which you have. You don't allow terrorists to have nuclear weapons.
So at the nuclear security summit,
Without naming Pakistan. The very fact that India was invited to such a meeting, and so there were two stars in that conference called by President Obama, China and India. But China is a recognized nuclear weapon power. It's a member of the Nuclear Five. India is not a signatory to the NPT and is not an official nuclear weapon power. But the fact is that India got the same attention and virtually, as Professor Rajaraman says, virtual recognition as a nuclear weapon power. That is the significance for India.
And additionally, the Prime Minister said that we would establish an institute for nuclear energy partnership in Delhi. Yogesh, that's a step forward again of a responsible state?
Definitely, nuclear security is very, very important. And as I will quote Professor Rajaraman's op-ed in Hindu, where he said that nuclear security is not like securing...
Is he a professor at the JNU or something?
I'm just a humble physicist.
Yes. So it's not like saving bank vaults or VIPs. It's a very different sort of scenario where you need to know the technicalities of the situation, where you need to know how to verify, what kind of fissile material it is, how you stop export or import of nuclear material. And then you need but there are many things India have to come, to bring about.
1,000 each. So, which really brings us to this whole idea, which is built around the National Security Summit, of limiting, reducing and eliminating nuclear weapons. Now, when we talk of eliminating nuclear weapons, we are talking about what Lalit just said, global zero, nuclear zero. And since you had that chapter at the JNU and you've been to Paris to attend this conference, what do we mean by nuclear zero?
There is a syllogism in physics which says no fissile material and no nuclear weapons. The idea is to completely abandon the very logic of nuclear weapons, and therefore, you need complete elimination on the very fact that states came to use these kind of weapons for their security. Now, if you eliminate, the very
what he said, salience, delegitimize.
Exactly.
So this question of having a nuclear weapon for the sake of prestige is an idea that has to be removed.
Yeah, and if you want to look into how this can be done, one can look into the Chemical Weapons Convention, the 1925 Geneva Convention and 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention, and you would find that they've been completely delegitimized. Not only the use, but the very existence of chemical weapons have been delegitimized. Now, in case of nuclear weapons, the use is delegitimized, but the existence is still legitimate, because most of the states look at their security through the very idea of nuclear weapons. So you have to submit down the line taboo, the very existence of nuclear weapons.
So it's a difficult goal, but coming back to you, Lalit, the United States is loath to exercise no first use, because one of the first steps in the movement, in the de-escalation or delegitimization, would be a universalization of the no first use.
Exactly.
Now, the United States is loath to do.
Well, President, first of all, sir, there's a caveat that part of the scheme of progressively reducing nuclear weapons is to bring into force the CTBT, that nobody will start testing. Then the fissile material cutoff treaty is vital for this, that people stop producing fissile material, and there is accountability for it. And then you take progressive steps to reduce this. The problem here is that at a time we are thinking that nuclear weapons are going to be irrelevant for security, nuclear power is going to...
NPT is not restricted to the treaty alone. The NPT regime one has to look at, the non-proliferation regime, and you would find India very much in the non-proliferation regime.
Quite right.
Very much, when it comes to Proliferation Security Initiative, when it comes to IAEA, when it comes to many other facets of the non-proliferation and disarmament.
So it's got in through the back door.
It's got into the back door, but there is a greater need to incorporate India. It's such a pivotal player in international politics. As such, nobody can deny that fact. So it's important. The case of India was very logical, and it was very justified.
You have Pakistan and Israel. So what do you do about that?
No, definitely. So, yeah, they are problems.
People are the non-proliferation Ayatollahs are saying you made this exception for India.
When I look through international treaties and international law, I see it as selective. I see it as time selective. And it depends upon, the international law is based upon the practices of the state. And if practices of the state do not conform to international law, they would not be incorporated into it.
One last state under the NPT. So India will remain outside the NPT. So the answer is yes, we need a review. I think that's generally the consensus of this panel. Thank you, Raja. Thank you, Lalit Mansingh. Thank you, Yogesh Joshi. The immediate concern after the Nuclear Security Summit is for countries to ensure that their nuclear arsenal and the nuclear material is safe and secured, and to make sure that this happens in a time-bound frame of 4 years. India has complied with all its obligations, and as our panel has said, that it has behaved as a responsible state with nuclear weapons. Well, on that happy note, we